There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Ready?
Okay, we are live.
3, 2, 1. Hello, Internet. This is Justin Freed. The day after the Apple Watch was announced, and I cannot say how excited I was by that announcement. But putting that behind us, we have a very special guest. His name is Tim Hwang. Am I pronouncing that right, or should I have just said Wang?
Don't worry about it. You're all good.
All right. And then the second thing see, I was going to say Imgur.
Yeah, it's actually supposed to be Imager, but I can't blame you because it's spelled Imgur. So
okay. So, all right, so
use whatever you want, I'd say.
We're gonna back up there, and then we're going to say this is episode 158 according to Heim Time with inThirty. Our special guest is Tim Hwang of Imager, IMGUR.com on the web. Okay, thank you. And with us, as always, is Paul N. Shapiro, paulandshapiro.com, and Chaim Cohen of HaimTime.com. And this episode will go down as having the worst introduction ever, and that is a hard title to earn. But Tim, beyond all the questions that we could potentially ask you about Imager, tell us what you are here to discuss.
A new initiative that Imager is launching along with ARC, Reddit, Stack Exchange, and Twitch, called the Digital Ecologies Research Partnership, or DERP for short.
DERP. Okay. So that sounds really cool, and you named some cornerstone kind of websites that you're working with. It's interesting that Stack Exchange and Twitch are involved. It just seemed like they're kind of separate between the gaming world and the software development world. But how do all these things tie together to form any initiative, let alone one with the very cute acronym DERP?
Well, so they're all community sites. I think that's the key thing, that they're not these like enormous platforms like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. They're basically kind of people, they're sites where people kind of identify themselves with the site and participate in the site as a community. And what DERP is designed to do is basically to help sort of academic researchers get access to data to kind of understand what's going on these platforms and how kind of communities are evolving. So it's like a lot of social scientists and anthropologists and sociologists and people like that.
After we had Drew Curtis on from FARC the last time, I don't know what kind of academic data you can get from the content, from the comments. I mean, I think we were called every misogynistic name under the sun.
Well, those are being filtered out now.
So I mean, maybe the number of times we were called dumb or conceited or stupid or anything else. I guess that's good for academic research.
But Tim,
it turns out that stuff is like it's actually super valuable. Like academics are really interested in stuff mostly because it allows them to get at questions that they previously were never able to even understand. So.
But you're not going to do us dirty like OkCupid and Facebook did, right? You're not going to play with our emotions and lean on the fact that we made a little small checkbox in a long EULA like 10 years ago to manage this data, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's nothing like that. I mean, obviously with all these platforms, because they are community sites, they're really interested in user privacy for one. And number two, they're really just interested in like responsible use of data. So, the way DERP is set up is basically the platforms get to decide what data they want to provide. And in a lot of cases, they're mostly going to be helping people navigate the existing like API on the site. And so, I think another thing that we're doing certainly is that all the research that we're supporting is going to be sort of like publicly noted and available, so there's like high transparency with what's going on as well. The idea is to see whether or not we can do research in a way that isn't, totally shady. So.
And so as part of that the end result, the desired result is vetted before anything else, that it has to be published in a public academic journal and not used by a marketing research firm somewhere in Silicon Valley, or how do you decide in the first place who gets to play around with the data? How does someone get the
Right. And I think, a lot of the platforms are really interested in that, and certainly speaking from Imager's point of view, like we're super concerned about that. I mean, just because like, there's a community on the site and like we want to do right by them effectively. And so, right now DERP is very much limited to like academics that are at like existing real institutions. We've been approached by marketing companies and stuff, but we're definitely not like going to do anything with them. So
So Paul, don't ask. You can't use it.
Shame.
Paul is our SEO expert. So if you need SEO help, he will make sure DERP.institute gets to the top of the Google rankings.
I appreciate that. Although I don't know if we're competing with any other institutes out there.
Well, my question is, can you give an example of something? I mean, I've been on FARC for, I don't know, 10 years now. I don't know what kind of market data, the number of clicks. I mean, can I ask something like, how do left-leaning sites fare in a midterm election year, and we can get data from that? Or am I completely off the mark?
Yes, No. I mean, there's a lot of questions you could ask, right? So this whole project got inspired by these two research papers that came out a little while back. Both of them kind of like nerdy, but if you've spent any time on these platforms, immediately gets really interesting. There's one from this kid at Stanford that was researching how random acts of pizza worked on Reddit. And so the idea was kind of tracking the movement of pizzas through Reddit effectively. And so the general study was like, can we understand how communities get together and coordinate, these sorts of things? But it was kind of using that effectively as a medium. And so I remember reading that and being like, oh, that's really cool, right? Like, the community kind of all collected around something, but like, no one really understood kind of the whole picture. And so here's like a way of like looking at that. Another one that was really interesting was, and it was sort of unrelated to the platforms that are involved, but like was basically looking at like collaborative encyclopedia projects before Wikipedia, like what made them work, what made them not work, all that kind of stuff. And so, we kind of want to do that sort of thing with DERP as well, is like kind of, can we ask like more serious questions outside all of the funny cat pictures, or like kind of derive like some bigger understanding of like what's going on these sites. Like, so I think the politics stuff is really interesting, right? Like do left-leaning and right-leaning subreddits organize in different ways? I think that's like a really interesting question. So.
How many people did the Ice Bucket Challenge?
I was gonna.
Were you gonna ask that?
Well, I mean, through the lens of the Ice Bucket Challenge, we can kind of get to the value of something like DERP. It almost, I have a lot of questions, even though before we go into, I guess, the pragmatic nature of it. But is part of what you're doing here trying to get rid of the biases that people might have when they answer questions on a survey, and instead study how they act when they think no one is looking except for the DERP guys, so that people don't and most people don't use a recognizable username on Reddit. Is that part of what you're trying to do to get into people's minds beyond traditional survey data?
No, I mean, I envision the research potentially even involving surveys as well. I think that the main advantage of using existing data, though, is I agree. It's basically, because people kind of behave the way they behave, right? There's a lot of things that they might expose just as a matter of course. So I should emphasize, I mean, right, like it isn't necessarily that they don't know that no one is watching. Like a lot of this data has been kind of accessible through the API for some time. So I think a lot of it more is just like, if you're going to research a community, is it better to like, go in and like kind of directly ask them questions, or like see how they behave and then kind of draw inferences? But I think both of them are like really interesting ways of kind of getting at the questions. So.
Okay, so.
If that makes sense.
I'm an academic institute, and I wanna research the community on Imager. I go through DERP. What type of things can I get access to?
So for Imager, basically we've decided to leave it kind of pretty wide open. We want to see kind of what's out there, and then we'll kind of make the call as research requests basically come in. And so if you are a researcher, what you would do is you.
Sorry.
Yeah, we have existing APIs, but I think we're open to also exploring other stuff. For example, we just launched this like tagging feature effectively, and so the whole community now is in the process of like tagging all the images, and so it kind of reveals a lot about like the content and how the content is related to one another and all that kind of stuff. And so there's researchers, for example, who want to get like dumps of images for like testing like computer vision algorithms and stuff. So I think there's like a bunch of other applications, and basically the way that what DERP does effectively, we're not like a data broker or the reviewing organization at all. Basically, like requests come through, and then we basically put those people in touch with the platforms, and they kind of figure it out from there.
So the most important thing that you're doing then is interpreting the APIs of the partner sites to ease the process for researchers to kind of get at the data? Is that the crux of it then?
Yeah, and also, well, and kind of to basically give some like TLC around it, basically. So a lot of this emerged because we were talking to Reddit and a couple other platforms, and we were like, how do you deal with academic like requests? Because like Imager has just gotten to the point where that's starting to happen, and a lot of people were like, just like someone knows someone who knows someone who can get them the data. And so if you're a researcher, it becomes like pretty high cost to like both do a study, because like you have to like hit the API and then try to get in touch with someone within the company if you have any particular questions. And it basically becomes like virtually impossible to do like cross-platform studies, which is something I think is like really, really cool that might eventually emerge from this. And so effectively what DERP is like an open door. It basically says, here's a way to get in touch with the kind of relevant contact people at each of these platforms. And we're also talking to one another. So if you want to set up a cross-platform study, we're open to it as well. And so it basically makes it a lot easier for academics to kind of like, ask these sorts of questions and like work on this kind of research. So for example, for Reddit and Imager, because the relationship is so close to them, there's a lot of kind of cross-platform studies you could imagine doing, right? Which is like, when an image is posted, how does it spread through the subreddits, right? Or one of the ones we're considering right now is like, how do communities respond to like natural disasters, and does it look like different on different platforms? That's kind of interesting, right? Like, because like news will spread on FARC, but it also spread on Reddit, and like how the community like talks about it and like interacts with it is going to be different. So
you had set up DERP before the fappening occurred. Is that the right word?
Right.
Happened. The fappening happened. It seems like that's kind of redundant.
Sure. Right.
Oh yeah.
It came out. I think we've been live for basically about like 2 months right now, and the conversations to start to happen like a couple months before that. So it's been going for a little while now.
So can we get some insight after the fact into how stolen pictures of Jennifer Lawrence made their way through Imager, and how they were probably taken down by your crack team of like compliance experts and then reposted by others? I mean, is that part of of what you're going after, or is that too internal? That DERP isn't trying to even make sense of the data. It's more trying to help people that are experts at making sense of the data, and we're not doing it for profit. Like internal.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, right. So, for example, like, I mean, a lot of platforms have said, like, we're not going to reveal anything about, like network topology.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're just not going to kind of reveal anything about, like, how our servers are set up and that kind of stuff. A lot of platforms have also been like, we're probably not going to support, like, experiments, right? Like, stuff that actually changes, like, the behavior of the site in any way. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there are probably projects that platforms would be more or less comfortable with supporting. And I think it's kind of a very voluntary system. Basically, the platforms get to decide. So, like, the proposals will come, and they'll sort of make a decision accordingly. And I think that's kind of which will be the ultimate question about DERP is, like, is there enough overlap between what the researchers want to look into and what the platforms are willing to do that, you get actually interesting results. And I think that's kind of an experiment that's currently, rolling. We're going to have to see how that turns out for sure.
So if in 2 weeks you're talking to someone from the New York Times, you're going to be answering either, maybe both types of questions, but either one, something like, so did you know when you started DERP that there would be so much user pushback, even though you were following the letter of the law, so to speak, as far as revealing data use in aggregate? Or you could be answering questions like, did you know that when you founded DERP, you would have found the absolute best way to make people pour water on their heads for the purpose of supporting research into a debilitating illness?
Sure. Is the question, like, are we going to run into those questions in the future?
I mean, it seems like the door is open now to, like, even before the founding of DERP, certainly this information was available in a kind of fire hose way, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was about to, right, that's what I was about to say, is, like, in a lot of ways, I think, like, the platforms in some ways aren't doing all that much new. What DERP adds is basically, like, a contact, essentially. We're basically, it's basically facilitating connections. And I think, like, any risks that platforms face. And I think they're important risks. I mean, I think one of the benefits that the platforms are getting, certainly like that Imgur is getting, is that we get a chance to kind of like talk with other platforms and be like, how do you deal with this like tough request, or like, do you guys support these types of requests? All that kind of stuff. And so like, I think platforms are also like really interested in just talking with one another about like how best to deal with this, right? Because I think everybody agrees that like we shouldn't just close down all research entirely, right? Because there's like fascinating things that are happening. But I think also everybody agrees like they don't want to do it in a way that's like crappy to users, and I think that's really important. It's something that like all the platforms feel really super strongly about, which is I think kind of interesting in the wake of like the Facebook and OkCupid stories and stuff, and how that shapes I think is something that's going to be like a moving target, but it's kind of like the platforms kind of want to be able to like talk about it and do it right.
What about the government? Can the government issue requests, or do we? I mean, either for good and bad.
At least through DERP, I don't think anything that any of the platforms would support.
Well, I mean, I
think in general, like the government can issue requests, like they issue subpoena requests around CP and all this other kind of stuff, and so. I think that does happen, but I think that's probably outside.
Well, I guess the better question is, now that you have all this centralized information, are we giving the government or the NSA with the three-letter organizations the ability to collect data easier? Because I mean, you're trying to provide a great service, but it also works on the other side to find people who can we find this demographic that's going. On all these different services that do these bad, terrible things?
I mean, I think that's kind of like not even outside of DERP. That's actually just an interesting question about like the internet in general, right? So, like we built all these platforms that are like common, and it isn't like use BBSs back in the day, right? Like it was like this kind of like you would call in and then you'd immediately log out, and like there would be like very loose connections. Like not everybody would kind of be dependent on these super centralized platforms. I think.
I'm just trying to ask whether you are currently or have ever been on the payroll of the NSA.
No, I'm not. Because you can't answer that.
Our office can't confirm or deny.
Okay.
Of course. Well, the idea is here's the idea. Facebook goes at length to protect users' privacy. Not that I believe that they're trying to protect users' privacy, but they don't want anyone else to get the data that they cultivated in that sense. Mm-hmm. And here you are opening it up to whoever wants it. And so not that that's a bad thing, because clearly we want these cross-platform things to do all this work, but it just makes it easier for now everyone to get that said information.
And if the premise is that academia, or if somewhere in your premise is that academia itself is valuable, then what DERP is doing ought to be valuable, so long as they're following the rules that say that only academics will get to the data. It seems like it's fodder for like a lot of Atlantic stories that say things like, well, people that are liberals are more inclined to help people when they see that they've had a car accident, and conservatives are more inclined to not open the door when someone's banging on it ferociously after, and not to trivialize it necessarily at this juncture, but
yeah, right. But like, are you asking kind of like, are we going to just get like a lot of like human interest stories out of this?
Seems like that's the types of questions that it answers at a sociological level, and I guess there is a pragmatic point to it, which is if you want to spread information that is really valuable, I don't know, if one of the Ebola patients breaks out of Emory, the hospital in Atlanta, I don't know, what subreddit do you go to? Where do you plant this information? I mean, it's kind of stuff like that.
Right. What's the best subreddit to check in case of an epidemic?
Right.
I mean, so I think that's the interesting thing about the internet. So I used to run a conference, and this is actually how I know Drew. As I used to run this conference, and the whole premise of RaffleCon was like, let's just bring together everybody who is momentarily famous on the internet to talk about like web culture and memes and that kind of thing. And so we had like, we had the guy who started 4chan. We had like various people who were like, we brought the David After Dentist kid and the dad. And like stuff like that. And what was really interesting is that we basically like, once you got all the people together, it turned out there was like these really interesting conversations that would occur about like, like the ethics of like having your kid be an internet celebrity, or like, like do platforms owe obligations to their users? Like all this kind of really interesting stuff. And I think that's the interesting thing about the web, right? Is basically like on some level, it's just about like random stuff, right? Like it's like in case of Ebola, here's the safest subreddit to go check. But on the other level, right, it's also about kind of like these bigger questions about just like how people organize themselves and like talk to one another and kind of, exist, I guess, in a more like big picture sort of way. And I think understanding those are good, right? How do we design like a more like a healthy community? Like, that's actually a really interesting question, I think.
A healthy community. I mean, it's in a couple of weeks after FARC decided to mod out overtly sexist and misogynistic content. It's interesting that you say that. But just here's a quick quiz as I'm going through the YouTube list of YouTube. I'm sorry, going through the Wikipedia list of YouTube personalities. Who's that black guy whose I think sister's room was broken into?
Tayson Day.
Thank you. What's it? I like.
Chocolate Rain.
Oh, Tayson Day we never got because his agent demanded a ludicrous amount of money. So we never got him at the conference.
The fellow who's he talked to the newscasters and then he was auto-tuned into saying like to making it funny. He was like No one's.
Hide your kids, hide your wife.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Wait, is it turning into a meme show?
I'm just. It's a little quiz for Tim to see if he really was he there and what is his name?
What?
His name I don't remember.
All right, I like these little asides.
Antoine Dodson.
There you go. Thank you. There we go. Okay, you passed. All right, you got it. I don't know if and you didn't use Google Glass to look that up surreptitiously. We can verify that. I didn't see your hands on the keyboard.
You can verify that. Yeah, right.
So maybe the beauty of what DERP does then is we know now that it makes things easier at, I guess, kind of at a software and data level for researchers to kind of get their hands dirty. But it seems like it incentivizes cross-platform research, which might, I guess, yield insights that studying any given site wouldn't, because maybe there's something in the site that directs user behavior, and doing some type of regression analysis across the sites can adjust for the fact that, I don't know, Imager only gives 3 options to click on per image, whereas if you're browsing on Twitter, there are 100. I don't know, like to kind of answer questions about UI that couldn't otherwise be answered.
Right, that's totally right, actually. So, this even happens right now because it's mostly academic study like Twitter and Facebook now. Like, there's like a lot of attention spent on that. And I think for all of those papers, there's always the question, which is like, yeah, I guess that's true on Twitter. Is it like generalizable? Does it actually explain how people behave like on an internet-wide level? So like there's been a lot of studies about like how does like disinformation happen, right? Like how do people like think that a celebrity has died when a celebrity has not died, right? And the big advantage of the cross-platform studies, you can basically be able to say like, okay, we know this story started now. How did it percolate across all these platforms? And does it turn out that really what we're saying apply from platform to platform to platform, right? Because if you spend any time on the internet at all, particularly on like online communities of various kinds, they behave really super differently, right?
Are you
like,
telling me that
how a community reacts
is alive? Is that what you're trying to say? Is Robin
alive and well? Yeah, it was all it's all just a cover-up.
Then how can you answer the question about what drives certain communities to those websites? I mean, you can see that kind of maybe at a meta level, but do you also see the discussions? Like, I mean, certainly Condé Nast knows that Reddit has a demographic, and I'm sure that Twitter's new ad platform sells advertisers on being able to reach just who they want to, just like any other online ad platform kind of reveals. But can you get into how someone chooses to become big into Snapchat? I don't think that they're ever going to open their API, or I mean that's probably not in their corporate culture. But can you tell us that?
But yeah, like I think right. Yeah, I think that's actually an interesting part of the question. I've debated with a couple of people about this, which is like is it the way? Is there something in the way that, for example, FARC is designed that attracts certain types of people to FARC? Or is it just like the community that emerges over time? like if Reddit had been designed differently, would it not have like be a home to like kind of like hardcore like tech libertarian folks? Like I don't know. I think there's kind of these interesting questions about like the extent to which like the design of the platform actually influences like who finds it to be a site that they would really want to spend a ton of time on.
Karma works.
Because I can tell you, I mean, say what?
I think karma works. I think that besides the crowd, I think that if you want an answer, and I'm not talking only about like explain it like I'm 5 questions. I'm talking about like
sure.
Really, if you, like I've posted pictures of like really weird old hardware in offices and stuff. And I could not find it in Google Images or anything. And I posted a picture in Reddit, and probably like the person who had the biggest expert, it was an old type of vacuum tube system, it turned out, and somehow that image got into the eyeballs of a man who used to service them, and actually he put copies of the manual, to explain to me what this weird stuff in the ductwork was. That if I put that on Twitter,
that's intense.
It's just not going to happen. If I throw that out on Facebook, my
would not have been.
So I don't know if it's karma or what, but
Well, can I ask?
Yeah, and I think it's really.
I was going to say, I want to move on to, are there any other type of partners other than, I mean, you have the few there. Are you looking at, is there anybody else? Is Dig still around looking to get in?
I think Dig is still around, actually. But, yeah, I think, we set out with these 5. I'm super comfortable with these 5. We're going to try to do a good job with them, because I think this is still very much a test, right? Like, you can probably tell as I'm talking to you here, like, a lot of it is still unknown about how this thing is going to play out. And so I think we want to see whether or not we can actually generate good research with these platforms and the researchers that we have on board. And if it works really well, I'm not adverse to saying like we keep expanding it out, because I think the more platforms on it, the more interesting potential research projects you can do.
I want to know what kind of research you get with /B. Let's get some 4chan from /B, and let's see what.
If 4chan ever agrees to doing a research partnership, that'd be crazy. But somehow I doubt it.
Look, Christopher Poole, I hear, is a very smart guy. He may be up for it.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. Again, I know him through AwfulCon, and yeah, he's super friendly. But obviously, I think he knows his community and knows that it has certain feelings about stuff. So.
Okay, we got 2.5 minutes left. So, final thoughts.
I want to know about the name. Do you have any issues with people taking it seriously?
I mean, we have gotten like emails from like serious academics who I guess don't know the internet culture reference, and being like, is that kind of what you mean? Or
are you getting Noam Chomsky to say derp, derp, derp or something? Because
that's kind of, yeah, I would have to say that is an additional benefit of it, getting emails from like Harvard and stuff, or like researchers being like, we'd like really like to investigate a partnership with the DERP Institute. Every time that happens, it's just like, so I think that's definitely been a cool element of it.
I think having the .institute top-level domain is the right answer.
I think what I was saying is, Haim told me we were having you on, and I didn't know about you guys, and my first reaction was, is this some kind of joke? Is this an Onion article?
Yeah, we actually got that reaction from a few people, but I think I actually think it's good. I mean, it's a sign that the platforms they want to support the research, but they're not taking themselves too seriously on it, and I think that's important because on some level, some of the stories are going to be about some of the research is going to be about funny cats, and we're going to just do it because I think it's interesting to look into that stuff. And so I think the name has actually served us quite well because it sounds serious when you say it the full way, and then when you use the acronym, it suddenly makes sense. So.
What's the most popular type of lolcat on Catterday? I'm sure that's some academic would definitely want to know about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, if we can just end up that a bunch of PhDs around the country end up spending a ton of time on those types of questions, I don't know, I think that's kind of a win. So.
Okay, we got to wrap it up now. So.
All right, this has been episode 158, 157, 157.5, or something of your favorite tech podcast, inThirty. Tim from the DERP Institute, and you can get there on the web at http:// derp.institute, no.com. Thanks for joining us and explaining what you guys are doing. See you around.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Bye.
See you around.